It's October 31st, 2005, at around 11:30 p.m., and we find ourselves on the Avery family property in rural Manitowoc County, Wisconsin. A cold and eerie mist settles over the desolate landscape, a sense of foreboding hangs in the air, as we watch the unfolding events in the case that would captivate the nation. A 25-year-old photographer, Teresa Halbach, has just arrived at the Avery property, and her fate would soon be sealed. Her camera equipment is still intact, but her body is never found, just a few charred remnants of her SUV, a burnt-out shell that hints at a tragic and violent end. The darkness that night would soon give way to a decades-long nightmare for Steven Avery and his family. The scene is one of eerie desolation, the moon casts an ominous glow over the barren landscape, as the faint sound of distant howling wolves echoes through the night air. A solitary figure, Teresa Halbach, steps out of her SUV, the crunch of gravel beneath her feet the only sound that breaks the silence. The Avery property looms in the distance, a sprawling complex of worn cabins and weathered barns, a sense of decay and neglect hangs heavy in the air. As the camera pans across the landscape, the faint hum of distant radio chatter is heard, the voice of an unseen narrator sets the tone for the events that will unfold. The night air is heavy with foreboding, a sense that something is amiss, and that the lives of those involved will never be the same. Teresa Halbach, a 25-year-old photographer, is a vibrant and energetic young woman, with a bright smile and a free spirit, a sense of adventure that drives her to capture the world's beauty through her lens. Her camera equipment is still intact, a testament to her profession, but her body is never found, leaving behind only a few charred remnants of her SUV. The investigation that follows would uncover a web of deceit and corruption, that would lead to the conviction of Steven Avery and his nephew Brendan Dassey. Avery, a 45-year-old man, with a troubled past, a history of run-ins with the law, and a reputation for being a bit of a troublemaker. His family's life would soon be turned upside down, as the world watched in horror. Witnesses would later come forward, claiming to have seen Teresa Halbach on the Avery property, just hours before her disappearance. One neighbor, a Mrs. Callas, would report hearing a strange noise, a faint scratching sound, that seemed to come from the Avery property. Another witness, a Mr. Kramer, would claim to have seen Halbach's SUV on fire, just moments before the blaze was extinguished. Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell, we post new cases every single day. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story, and the events that would lead to the conviction of Steven Avery and his nephew Brendan Dassey. You see, this case is one of wrongful conviction, of a man who spent 18 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, and the subsequent investigation into the murder of Teresa Halbach. Steven Avery, a 24-year-old man from Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, was the central figure in this shocking true crime case. He lived on County Road 1, a rural area surrounded by woods and farmland. As a steel worker, Steven provided for his family, including his brother Earl, and his nephew Brendan Dassey. Despite his rough exterior, Steven was known for his charismatic personality and good looks. However, his charming facade often hid a darker side. Steven's daily life was a mix of hard work and family time. He was a devoted father to his 2 children from a previous marriage and a loving partner to his second wife, Jody. Steven's family relied on him for financial support, and he took his responsibilities seriously. He was also known to be fiercely independent and nonconformist, often clashing with authority figures. This independent streak would eventually land him in hot water with the law. As a result, Steven's tough exterior and refusal to back down often made him appear unlikable, at least to some. Despite his rough demeanor, Steven's charisma made him likable to many who knew him. His charming smile and easygoing nature immediately won over new acquaintances, making them feel at ease. His loyal family and friends also saw a softer side of Steven, one that was kind and caring. However, for those who knew Steven, there was always a sense of unease, as if he was hiding something. This contradictory nature made it difficult for people to discern the truth about Steven's character. Steven's relationships were complex and multifaceted. On one hand, he was deeply devoted to his family, particularly his brother Earl and nephew Brendan Dassey. However, his relationships with women were tumultuous, marked by infidelity and a string of failed relationships. Steven's charm and good looks often wore off once he got to know them better, and they were left feeling disappointed and disillusioned. His relationships with authority figures were also strained, as he frequently clashed with police officers and judges. As the months leading up to Teresa Halbach's murder drew to a close, Steven's relationships with women would take a dramatic turn, with tragic consequences. October 31, 2005, the day of the infamous murder of Teresa Halbach, a 25-year-old photographer from Altoona, Wisconsin. It was a chilly autumn evening, with a light drizzle casting a gloomy atmosphere over the Avery salvage yard in Manitowoc County. The sun had set hours ago, casting a dark shadow over the yard, where Steven Avery, a man with a checkered past, had been living and working since his 2003 exoneration. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filled the air as the investigation into Halbach's disappearance was about to unfold, but no one could have anticipated the shocking events that were about to transpire. As the clock struck 4 p.m., the first alarm bells had yet to ring, but for the people of Manitowoc County, the eerie feeling of foreboding had just begun to set in. It was supposed to be a routine day for Teresa Halbach, who had been tasked with taking photos of a new minivan at the Avery salvage yard. Unbeknownst to her, the owner of the yard, Steven Avery, had been struggling financially, and taking Halbach's photos would be his chance to prove to the world that he was innocent and capable of turning his life around. But little did Avery know, this chance would soon turn into a nightmare, one that would not only change his life forever but also leave a family torn apart and a community traumatized. Avery had been making amends for a wrongful conviction of 18 years and was desperate to prove his new life as a law-abiding citizen. As he interacted with Halbach, his intentions seemed genuine, but the course of events was about to take a drastic turn. On this fateful day, Steven Avery, accompanied by his nephew Brendan Dassey, had asked Teresa Halbach to come to the Avery salvage yard to take photos of the new minivan that needed advertising. As she arrived at 2:15 p.m., Halbach began taking photos of the vehicle, but when she finished, she mentioned that she had to return the camera equipment to the news station, and Avery offered to help her. The two men left in separate vehicles, but Halbach's phone and camera were never seen again. The events that followed would raise more questions than answers, as Avery and Dassey were later accused of murdering Halbach and disposing of her body on the yard's property. The gruesome discovery would leave investigators scratching their heads and a community shaken to its core. One of the most disturbing and shocking details of the crime was the gruesome discovery of Teresa Halbach's remains on the Avery salvage yard's property. In a hidden grave, investigators found Halbach's charred bones, skull, and a charred fragment of her clothing. The image of Halbach's skeletal remains, half buried in the ashes of a grave dug by her accused killers, would leave viewers speechless and haunt them for years to come. The scene depicted a level of brutality and disregard for human life that was both chilling and heartbreaking, raising questions about the true nature of the perpetrators and the depths of their depravity. As images of the grave were broadcast worldwide, the investigation into Halbach's murder was only just beginning, and the truth behind her tragic fate was far from being revealed. The police first responded to Teresa Halbach's disappearance when her family reported her missing on November 3, 2005. A search party was sent to the Avery salvage yard where Halbach's car was found abandoned. Initially, investigators believed Teresa might still be alive, but as the investigation continued, it became clear that a crime had been committed. The police began to search the salvage yard and Avery's trailer. A key player in the investigation would be Robert Hansen, the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office's top investigator. A crucial piece of evidence that changed everything was a key piece of incriminating evidence found on a garage door at the Avery property. The key was discovered on November 4, and its discovery led investigators to believe that Steven Avery and his nephew Brendan Dassey might be involved in Teresa Halbach's disappearance. The key matched the lock on Halbach's car, and investigators found a bullet in the trunk of the car. The bullet was a significant piece of evidence, as it matched a bullet found in a shell casing at the Avery property. This discovery led investigators to believe that the crime had likely occurred at the Avery property. The two main suspects in the case were Steven Avery and his nephew, Brendan Dassey. Investigators focused their attention on the two men, as they believed they had a significant motive to commit the crime. The police also questioned other family members and friends of Avery's, but the focus remained on Avery and Dassey. Avery's history of a wrongful conviction and release from prison also made him a prime suspect. Avery's reputation and history of run-ins with the law likely contributed to investigators targeting him as a suspect. A red herring in the case was a suspect who initially drew attention but was later proven to be unrelated to the crime. The suspect was a woman named Scott Tadich, Halbach's ex-boyfriend, but after further investigation, police found that his alibi checked out, and he was cleared of suspicion. Tadich was interviewed multiple times by investigators, but ultimately, he became a person of interest for only a short time. His investigation wasted months of police time investigating him, which could have been spent gathering evidence related to the actual case. Eventually, the police realized he wasn't involved and shifted their focus to the main suspects. So, we've come to the final chapter of this true crime saga, and it's a real twist. The revelation that nobody predicted was that Brendan Dassey may not have been coerced into confessing after all. New evidence came to light, which contradicted the earlier claims of coercion and potentially implicated other suspects in the crime. The twist also raised questions about the involvement of the local law enforcement and the prosecutor's office in coercing Dassey's confession. It's a shocking turn of events that challenges everything we thought we knew about this case. The new evidence was uncovered by a team of investigators hired by Brendan Dassey's lawyers. They reviewed the original interrogation videos and discovered inconsistencies in the timeline of the events. The investigators also spoke with key witnesses and uncovered some suspicious behavior from the local police and prosecutors. One of the most significant revelations was that the police had destroyed evidence, including Dassey's clothing and the car he was driving on the day of Teresa Halbach's murder. This new evidence raises even more questions about the handling of the case by the authorities. After a long and arduous process, the case of Brendan Dassey is still technically open, and he remains incarcerated, but now on a new charge of violating his probation from his previous conviction. Meanwhile, Steven Avery, the man at the center of the case, has been released from prison after serving 18 years for a crime he did not commit. In 2020, Avery was arrested on charges of rape, but he maintains his innocence and claims the charges are a plot to discredit him and the documentary series that made his case famous. Avery's lawyer, Kathleen Zellner, is still actively fighting for his freedom, but it's unclear if they will be able to clear his name once and for all. Avery's story is a complex and disturbing tale of injustice and corruption. In the years following the documentary series, there have been significant changes in the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. The lead investigator on the case, Detective Colleen Nayu, was eventually fired for misconduct, and the county paid out millions of dollars in lawsuits to settle claims of misconduct and corruption. The county has also implemented reforms to prevent similar cases of police misconduct and corruption from happening again. As for the people directly involved in the case, Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey are still fighting for their freedom, while Teresa Halbach's family continues to cope with the loss of their loved one. We want to hear from you, viewers. Do you think Avery and Dassey are innocent, A, or did they get away with murder, B?